Hi, I'm Dan Whittaker. I'm here today to discuss the golf swing of Mr. Ben Hogan. What we're going to do with Mr. Hogan is have a look at the swing across the eras from the early days when he was struggling with the hook, going to when he found the secret, which would have been post-accident, pre-accident, then going on to post-accident footage, and then going on to what happened in the later years, which is when most people have got their footage and what was actually occurring to the swing during that time. Now this piece of footage here, very old piece, okay, and what we can actually see in this piece of footage here is how close the club face is relative to the left arm at the top. What this made Mr. Hogan have to do was to work underneath the shot, so he ended up kind of backing out of it a little bit, having to work underneath it and then going back onto his right side to try and hit the ball. We always then saw him almost falling over a little bit at the finish and struggling for balance. And in this particular piece of footage we see how the golf club is down the spine, and this tells us that the club's exited away from the body. Have a look at someone like Colin Montgomery, who finished with the club down the spine. These are very similar to how Mr. Hogan finished here, because the upper body was going backwards, or the head was going backwards, in order to work the club underneath to try and hit the ball with the desired loft, which is the only way he could do it from the position he was in at the top, where the club was so closed. He was always going to fight the club on the way down from this position. Next we see this low down image of him in colour from around the same era. We see how the swing's quite long, and the synchronisation of the backswing isn't there like it was later on, because here's the left shoulder stop. We see the club's travelled on a fair few feet really, and the club's actually quite closed here relative to the left arm. We then see how he's then over the left side. We see his head's now starting to go backwards as he's working underneath it to try and find some room to square that face up that was so closed. And he's always then battling against the club through the impact zone. Now we see this image. Okay, it's once again a very old image. We see a very long backswing once again, much longer than it was in his heyday. And we see that there is the left arm and there is the club face. Now, the one thing that he had was he had this tremendous amount of rotational speed, but he had to slow this down a touch and work under in order to allow this club face to square up from the shut position he had at the top. So he had the speed, but he wasn't able to use the speed effectively. So hence the reason when he used the comment with John Schley in Maximum Golf that when he was able to turn around it level left, that was when he was able for the first time to have the complete control over the golf ball. When he was able to get over the left side as soon as possible, be able to turn level left, that was when he had the greatest amount of control. In this colour image here, we again are able to highlight the club face position. Against the left arm there. So you see the club face is closed. We also see that from here how when he replants his left heel and he starts to unwind, how the club's underneath him, and you see there's a back out look to it, because in the much later footage, which we will look at in a short while, we'd see this upper left arm slamming into the rib cage here through the impact zone, whereas what we're seeing here is a huge gap in this area as he's hanging back in order to try and square the face, but he's not able to do it from the position he was in at the top. We can see here how it's attacking from the inside, how this left arm's a long way from the body, and then he's almost falling over backwards as he's trying to square this face up. When we see this piece of footage, you'll see something very evident here at the finish. You can see if we draw a vertical line up from the outside of the ankle up, we see that the belt buckle's actually on this line, but we actually bring this on a fraction more, and we can see how he's actually then fallen backwards, which tells us that the weight's gone there. He's not posted up and down at the finish. It then tells us that the toe box of the right shoe is pushing into the ground, which we can clearly see right in this area here. This then shows us that there's a lot of pressure still on this area of the foot as he's leaning back that way in order to try and square the golf club up. Now, what happened was he obviously weakened the grip, which has been well publicised, and he began to then rotate the left forearm. What this then did was shallowed out the plane, but also allowed him to keep the arms in front of the body but open the face up to the maximum amount. He was then able to fully rotate around that left side, level left once he got over it, and allow physics to work with him and allow that to then square the face for him. We've now moved on to some footage which is a long iron from the Power Golf video we made as promotion or material for the book shot at Augusta National. Now what we see here is it's a great setup position, but we see a phenomenal first move away. It's a very one-piece move as the upper body's turning away, the hands, the arms and the club are all following, and the club's just an extension of the body. From here, the left arm begins to rotate, the right elbow is folding down, and we can see how, very interestingly, the club is actually bisecting the right forearm. So this is a lot more upright than we saw him in the later years, where he was more inside and a little bit stacky looking. This has got the golf club in front of him, centre of the hands in line with the sternum. What we then see from here is he continues to rotate the left arm, and as he gets to the top, the left arm matches the shoulder plane. The right elbow is in front of the hip, yet the club head is laid off and offset from the hands, but with the hands in front of the body. Quite interestingly as well, we also don't see as much cup in the left wrist at the top as we did do later on, which also goes with the fact that the grip wasn't quite as strong at this point. Sorry, not quite as weak at this point, it's a little bit stronger. Now, what we'll see now is from this position, we will see how the club head begins to work down in this manner as the hands move forwards in front of the body. Because they're already in front of the body here, so as the left knee, left hip, left shoulder goes, the left shoulder roars away from the chin, and because the mass of the golf club is all in the club head then follows the line of the arrow and becomes even more laid off, increasing the angle in the wrist, therefore creating the lag. The arms are then in front of the body. Because the arms are in front of the body, and the right elbow is on the front part of the right hip. So the right shoulder, right elbow, right hip are together with the arms in front of the body. He now simply allows the butt of the club to work around, and we see that the left arm slams into the side of the body, and the face is released. So the face goes from being wide open here, the butt of the club works around, becomes in line with the left hip, the toe of the club works out, and the face magically just squares up. So he's got the inside of the body creating centripetal acceleration, which is then creating centripetal force into the club head. And he's basically got the three circles, the body's turning in one, the hands in a bigger one, and the club head in an even greater one. And what he's doing is the right elbow is now acting as a fulcrum on the right hip via the left side pulling. So the left side opens up more aggressively, the extreme upper left side then fully connected in, the inside of the left elbow is pulled into the body, butt of the club works around, head works out, club works right around, and is fully released up to the finish. Now when we see this footage from the front view, we highlight something very interesting. We draw this line here on the left hip and take Mr. Hogan all the way to the top. We see here, even at the top, he has this left hip on the line. So he doesn't have this COG shifting that we saw so much later on in his career, which was brought about basically by the onset of the accident, which crushed the lower left side of his body and made it very difficult for him to be able to make such a dynamic pivot motion. What we now see from here, though, is how he then moves the left knee, left hip, left shoulder away from the chin. He's now over the left pivot point, arms in front of the body. He then created the lag and simply unwinds around. And we see how he's now right over the left side, and he's turning around the shot and allowing the butt of the club to work around the corner. Okay, now from this head angle, this is one of my favourite pieces of footage of Mr. Hogan. What we see here is this tremendous one-piece move. We see the right shoulder, right hip turning back. Now this kind of pulls the club back away. This is what this caddy yard kind of lag drill looks like. You know, when the right shoulder and right hip pull away, the club head's the last thing to move, and the handle is the first thing to go. You see how much more synced up he is at the top here. So when the left shoulder stopped here, the club stopped much sooner. We also know that this was post-secret, pre-accident, as the club face is open, but we don't see any lateral motion in this action. You know, this is as close to being two turns as we can find. He simply then allows the left knee, the outside left foot to slam down. The left knee re-rotates over the outside of the ankle, left hip follows, and the left shoulder simply charges away from the chin. Then he's in position to be able to completely unwind around, and we see this upper left arm is slammed into the side of the body as the weight has then moved into the left heel. As the torso opens up, the butt of the club works down and around and bang, lines up with the left hip, and then everything is thrown right around to this finish, where he's much more posted up, and we see the club finish more across his ears rather than up and down the spine. In this piece of footage here on the left, we see how at the top Mr. Hogan has the club face and the left arm. The club face is open relative to the left arm, whereas on the right hand screen here we're going to see how the club face is very closed relative to the left arm, but the left arm is also very steep relative to the shoulder plane, which just tells us that the arms have worked more up as opposed to around. And it also tells us that the one on the left hand screen is when he had a left forearm rotation involved in allowing the club face to open. I'll bring it through on the right here. We can see how the club is going down his back and he's hanging back. We can now see on the left how the club is much more across his ears as opposed to up and down or closer to parallel to the ground. This piece of footage here was another great piece from before the accident, okay, but after the secret, and we can see this great first move here of Mr. Hogan. See the right hip, right shoulder turning back, the handles being dragged away. So this is kind of a lagging first move of the club being dragged away. We then see this left arm rotation, and the club's going through the bicep right here, and the arms are very much in front of the body. It's a very modern position. Then takes it to the top, arms in front of the body, the club shaft left laid off, then he makes it left knee, left hip, left shoulder roars away from the chin, arms in front of the body, right elbow on the front part of the right hip, then the butt of the club's allowed to work down and around, the head works out, and the face magically squares itself up. We're now going to bring onto the screen a piece of footage from just after the accident. Okay, so we see here the normal tremendous first move, okay, but what we then start to see is a lot more cup in the left wrist at the top here than we were seeing evidenced in the other golf swings. There's much less cup in this golf swing on the right hand screen than there is in the one on the left. Okay, even more evidenced in this particular piece of footage right here. we take Mr. Hogan again to the top of the backswing. We see that there's far less cup in the left wrist. Now, this would be taken back to what occurred during the accident, because during the accident, obviously, we're all aware of him jumping in the way of his wife to save her life. Okay, but sometimes it's not always made aware about exactly what happened in terms of his legs. Okay, the doctors discovered blood clots formed in his legs, and they were threatening to block the veins to his lungs. It forced them to make a big decision on Mr. Hogan's system, cutting through his abdomen. They tied off the inferior vena cava, an instinct tube, which is the main carrier of blood from the lower body. Now, it meant that for the rest of his life, Mr. Hogan's legs would swell and fatigue whenever he walked. Hence the reason he had bandages on the legs to reduce the swelling, and he had the salt bath to help alleviate and relieve him of the pain. Now, with him being in so much pain, it was always evidence that at this point, he after the accident, was when we saw even more cupping of the left wrist. I believe that this was when he also weakened the grip more so, because he wasn't able to unwind around that left side and use the tremendous speed from his pivot through the shot, because his body would not allow him to do this. Instead, he had to use the grip to help give him this beautiful fade shot he'd learnt to master. So weakening the grip off was what allowed him to continue playing in this exact manner. One of the other things that we also saw evidenced after the crash, well, in the later years, was that when he got his COG shifting, and this was again due to him not being able to wind up in the desired manner, therefore having to have more lateral motion in his golf swing, or this COG shift as it's called, than he had to have in the later years. Mr. Hogan, in his own words, had said that he played his best golf before the accident, and he said that the golf swing after the accident was that of a crippled man, and people should not copy it unless they wanted to do it badly. I don't believe that, but I do believe that he swung it at his very best before the accident. We're now going to have a look at some footage after the accident, just bring through a couple of eras there. In this one, we're going to have a look at the concept of level left, which is what he said to Schley. Once he realised he could get over the left side and attack with as much speed as he physically could and turn around level left through the ball, this was when he had the maximum amount of power, distance and accuracy. This is level left, when the elbows, hips and shoulders are parallel to one another and all at 90 degrees to the spine. And this is level left in the golf swing. You cannot have it any other way. This is the way that Mr. Hogan did it. Now, what happened was he went left knee, left hip, left shoulder. The right shoulder then got dragged down. This move of the left knee, left hip, left shoulder created the secondary axis tilt. In other words, his spine getting to a greater angle. He then began to unwind around this, and as he came through, this was when he was able to come through level left and be able to release the golf club using physics as opposed to be using manipulation or having to back out as he had done in the younger days. When we have a look at this, we're going to now have a look at how he releases the golf club. We see here how the right elbow's on the right hip, okay, and the left arm's a long way from the body, but the club's essentially pointing back to the golf ball. And then from here we see how he now starts to unwind, so this left side of the body is pulling the right side. There is no manipulation from the hands. The angle in the left wrist and right elbow are still being maintained, and the left side's opening, and the upper left armpit's being pulled into the body. The inside of the left elbow is being slammed into the rib cage, and the club's then being allowed to work around, and it stays very, very passive and remains at 90 degrees to the arc on the way through. The butt of the club works around, it's in line with the hip, club works around, the club face is very square, then it's released. So what happened then was, this was when the right arm elbow started to come off the hip, extended, and the left wrist recut. This is when the face became fully released, which was one of the key things that Mr. Hogan was able to do so superbly well. We see it very evidenced here in this golf swing. The top here, the arms are in front of the body, so he makes this sensational transition from the left side, the left knee, left hip, left shoulder. The elbow moves towards the front part of the body, but it's because it's so in front of the hip that as he turns through, the elbow is able to work in front. The shaft then works even more laid off because the mass is offset from the hands. Now at this point the club face is way open, the shaft is very, very, very shallow. All he simply does then is keeps the right side completely working as one unit. The right elbow, right shoulder, right hip, and the left side is pulling and he's working the left hip, left butt of the club around to get in line with the left hip. The face then works out, the toe works out, the face squares up, and then the club is allowed to work around, become fully released to the finish as the left wrist fully recups and the club is 100% released. One of the very interesting bits on Mr. Hogan's golf swing was his lower body. What he actually did was he turned very, very deep in the backswing. This right hip turned back, and created a lot of room for the arms to stay in front of his body and the elbow to stay in front of the right hip. He then made a move over the left side as the weight went from the right heel to the ball, then rapidly over the outside of the left foot, and then as he opened up, the weight went into the left heel and the butt of the club started to work around. But he had very quiet feet, and we always saw the right foot rolling over. We never saw it exploding off the floor, we always saw it rolling via the pivot, dragging the club and the arms around to the finish. This is very evident in all of his golf swings, and you can see it right here, this tremendous footwork, and you can see he's starting to get into the left heel here as the inside of the toe box is starting to work up off the ground, and his weight is all into the heel as he is accelerating around to the finish. It would be very remiss if I didn't show this particular piece of footage from the 53 Open at Carnoustie, which we know is the only Open he played in, but he also won. Okay, we see this tremendous transition here, left knee, left hip, left shoulder, right elbow on the right hip, it's on the front part of the right hip. Now, then he simply unwinds around with tremendous rotational speed from this core. So the core's flinging the club around to the finish, and it's so evidenced in this particular golf swing. It's a great piece of footage to be able to see the pure unwind. Now we go on to the later years, but we also see here how he was very, very stacky at the top here, how he looks very much over his left pivot point, whereas in this other footage here, we see how he's made a much deeper turn, the hips are more level, whereas the right hip's high. In the later footage, in the colour on the left hand screen, on the right hand screen we can see it's a much more dynamic pivot. What we actually see here is, if we just very gently highlight the shoulder and the chin, we don't see this gap grow at all, as it's sent the shoulder and the chin stick together. See here on the right hand screen how that's grown immediately, meaning the left shoulder separated away from the chin, meaning that it didn't have this leany look to it that it had in the earlier days. This then meant he could freewheel around to the finish and allow the club to fully release, whereas on the right hand screen he had this, left hand screen he had this blocky kind of look to the finish, and the club finished more up and down. It doesn't show the up and down look from this angle, but it will do in a moment. Now we have a look at this one here from the same tournament. We see how the shoulder and the chin stick together in this very stacky look, and as he's coming through, he has a more blocky type of look to the release, and the club's finishing more up and down. this one we see how quickly the shoulder moves away from the chin, and then he's able to simply unwind around. That left shoulder moving away from the chin was the dynamic of the pivot, whereas its sticking was when he had this much more leany appearance and leany look to the golf swing. We're going to have one last look at two more pieces of footage. Sorry. Going to have a look at this bit, which is quite a stacky bit that a lot of people use. Okay, we can see here how much flatter this golf swing was than when he was at his prime, and how much more cup he's got in the left wrist. Okay, the golf swing's quite shallow here, and he looks very stacky with a bit more straightening in the right leg. Still had the tremendous rotation, and he still had the elbow on the hip and allowed the butt of the club to work around the face, club head to work out. But he always had a more blocky look to the finish, kind of holding it off and hitting a lot of these three-fingery type looking shots. We see this blocky look in this one, how stacky looks over this left side. So as he comes through it, has this blocky kind of look through the ball where he's really holding on to it. This was something we never saw him do, or do very rarely in his prime, as he didn't have to be over the left side and kind of block it and hold the face off anywhere near as much through the golf ball. A lot of people use the footage from the Shell's Wonderful World of Golf match with Sam Snead as their evidence, but again, that was, when he was way past his best. But what we see here is we see evidence of this big amount of natural kind of shift in the backswing, this COG move, as it's like to be called. We see how evidence it is here. It's kind of slidey look that we never saw back in his prime. But again, we do see the level left concept right here. This is it, where the elbows, hips and shoulders are all parallel to one another. The butt of the club has been allowed to move around. The inner part of the left elbow has been slammed into the rib cage. The butt of the club's worked around, and the face has been allowed to square up. Lastly, just going to go a few bits for you. Okay, now I do all hope you've enjoyed watching my analysis of Mr. Hogan, obviously the greatest swinger of the golf club that there's ever been. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking it through with you all. If you want to contact me, you can do at danwhitaker@btconnect.com, or you can visit my website at danwhitakergolf.com. I'll be doing a load more analysis of Mr. Hogan on there, and also be doing some more for Gotham Blog and Ralph. I hope to see you all again soon, and thanks for watching.